Good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. This is John Gilmore here. We're just going to give a couple of minutes before those people are coming on now. So let's just give them a minute or two to get situated, and then we'll begin this amazing program we have for you today. So the people are just coming in now, watching the numbers click up. We're expecting a big draw, as Michelle always brings a big draw, and she always, whenever she invites her friends, no one can say no to Michelle. So we have some great people here today to talk with. So I'll just give you just another minute, and then we'll just jump right in. So, all right, Nancy, let's get started. We try to keep a tight ship. We'll be done right on time at 2 o'clock. So welcome, everyone. This is our monthly webinar that we put together that really is inspired to help people become business-minded strategic advisors. So our GC Advantage webinar series is a complimentary series. Today's a very special event for us as we're talking about women in law and the secrets to their success. And the program today is going to be recorded. Everyone will receive an email about when the recording is up on our website. It usually takes a week or two. Feel free to check out the website. It has previous webinars and the feedback coming back from people who attended or watched in the video form, recorded form, have all given us really high marks on it. So we appreciate that. So our upcoming GC Advantage webinar, we are taking July off for summer, giving everyone a break out there and giving our own team a break. But the next webinar will be August 9th. Should I stay or should I go? What to consider when contemplating a move. And I say this is a very important topic because many times, and I do help open my phone up to people to contact me to suggest potential moves and what do I think. And you want to make sure you're showing the best judgment when you are making these career moves, because it really comes back, when you're looking at your resume down the road, people ask, why did you make that move? And it really needs to make a lot of sense. So this is a really great topic that we're looking forward to coming up. As far as questions today, we're happy for questions. We encourage questions. We want this to be as collaborative as possible. If you scroll down, you'll see a Q&A on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask a question throughout the program, and we're happy to jump right in and answer it along the way. So we will answer some questions at the end of the presentation. That said, we're happy to answer as we go along. Now, today we have a great panel, as we talked about. Michelle Banks is one of our just terrific advisors. We couldn't be more proud or honored to have Michelle on our team. Just an amazing person to know. And Michelle, I've never told you this, but Michelle won in 2019 the American Bar Association Margaret Brent Award. Margaret Brent Award is given to a woman who's done more to help and support other women in law. And Michelle won that award. And I encourage everyone out there to Google Michelle Banks, Margaret Brent Award recipient, and you'll see a video on Michelle that involves her family and her career and her friends like Obama and everyone else, Clintons. It's amazing. It's just amazing that you watch that video and you really get to see such an amazing career, the relationships that she's established and the people that she's helped along the way. So I highly encourage that. So again, without further ado, I will introduce Michelle and turn the program over to you, Michelle.
Thanks, John. Okay, that was so unscripted, but thank you for recommending my Brent video. The ABA will like that. So I'm very excited to have here with me 3 of my 22 co-authors of Women in Law, Discovering the True Meaning of Success. So let me introduce them to you. Angela Hahn is a senior corporate counsel at Health Pro Heritage, where she handles commercial transactions, corporate litigation, and employment matters. Angela is also a professional life coach and hosts one of my favorite podcasts, Fit to Practice. Women in Law, our book, was Angela's idea, and she recruited me and 21 other women to contribute a chapter to this anthology. Angela graduated from Georgetown Law. Heather Stevenson is currently the general counsel of Red Cell Partners, a venture firm that incubates and invests in early stage technology focused companies in the healthcare or national security industries. Before moving to Boston and moving in-house, first at Boston Globe Media, Heather was an associate at Sullivan and Cromwell in New York. Heather graduated from Columbia Law. Tasha Gordon-Troy is founder and CEO of Ramses Publishing, a publishing and author services consulting firm where she serves as an editor, a ghostwriter, a writing coach, and more. I love her fitting hashtag behind the book. She is the publisher and editor of our book, and she contributed a chapter as a co-author of the book. Tasha graduated from University of Baltimore Law. So we hope that today's webinar will be relevant to you, whether you've never heard of our book, Women in Law, Discovering the True Meaning of Success, or whether you've already read the book. So my goal for this webinar is to be relevant whether or not you've read the book, whether or not you're a lawyer, and whether or not you're a man or a woman. And I applaud the about 10 brave men who signed up for this webinar. We welcome you. The book is actually not just about women, and the advice in it is great career advice and life advice for anyone. I thought I would read one of the quotes from the inside cover of our book that means the most to me because it's from my mentor, Michelle Coleman Mays, the General Counsel of the New York Public Library. Michelle says, the authors of Women in Law, Discovering the True Meaning of Success know the power of stories. This book is chock full of illuminating and inspiring ones. The rich, diverse voices of women attorneys beckon the reader to reflect on the many experiences shared, and then seem to invite the reader to write their own unique story, to say, I dare you not to. As John said, we encourage you to ask questions. We also encourage you to buy the book. If you haven't heard of the book yet, the profits are benefiting nonprofit Ms. JD. You can get the book in paperback on Amazon, and you can get it on readable format on lots of sources, from Barnes & Noble, Nook to bookshop.org. So lots of ways to buy the book. If you're inspired by the webinar and want to pick up a copy, maybe for one of your mentees. So with that, I would like to get you listening to Angela, Heather, and Tasha, my co-authors who've joined me as co-speakers today, and I really appreciate them being here. So I thought what I would do first to introduce the book and the topics covered into it is read to the audience my favorite quote from each of their chapters. So Angela, I'm going to start with you since you were the brains behind the book. The quote that I love the most, although I love your entire chapter, is life is about constant progress, new ideas, new movement, new concepts. It's what makes us feel alive. Your missteps and your mistakes are simply an indicator that you are on your way to something even more exciting. So tell us an example or a story or what else you want to tell us about that message, because I love the idea of constant change and learning and mistakes only being failures if we don't change and learn from them.
Yeah, so thank you for asking that great question, Michelle. So I guess in law school, I was really buying into the idea that you have to go to big law first, and there's a particular career trajectory that you need to be on so that you can be successful. And at the time, I didn't really know what success really meant. I was just kind of just collecting other people's stories of what success meant for them. And so I didn't really have a clearly defined understanding of what that would look like for me or feel like for me. And so I was just following other people's stories. And when I didn't get into any big law firm, because I don't know, for whatever reason, I didn't have the best grades, I thought that I simply had failed. I thought that I was not smart enough to be a lawyer. I thought that no one would want to work with me. People would tell me that you can't be in-house counsel unless you worked at a big law firm. And so just for a long time, for a span of like maybe like almost a year after graduating, I just didn't think that I would find a job that would be the right fit for me. But at the same time, I kept going on to see like what exactly is it that I'm interested in. I started asking myself, like, what is my interest? Not like what other people think I should do. Like maybe like at the time somebody was talking about M&A, like that is like the cool practice area to get into. But I was like, I don't know if that's really the right thing for me. And so I kind of tapped into my personal story of how I first came to the States with a lot of health issues, and trying to navigate the healthcare system was a huge challenge for me. And so I knew that I started getting curious about that. And then I started cultivating the knowledge that that is where I wanted to go into. And so when I started researching opportunities in healthcare, somehow, for some reason, I came across this junior attorney position just near where I live. And so I applied for it, and I met the most amazing, incredible boss that I can ever ask for, I could ever dream of. And now I'm able to work for somebody that I love showing up for every single day, and be able to have the flexibility to have 2 kids, have a family, and have a flexibility to build my business as a life coach, and have a podcast. And of course, now having this book with these incredible women. And so I really wonder if I had really followed other people's stories about what success meant for me. And then I don't know if I would have been able to make it at this exact moment here. And so it's almost like, I don't know if I can consider that a misstep or a mistake. It was really a redirection in finding what was really the right thing for me.
Love this. I've known you for 2 years, Angela, and I never knew you went into healthcare because of the challenges of being an immigrant and navigating the US healthcare system. That's so inspiring. I love that. Now, I've heard you talk before about your boss being awesome. So tell us like 2 things that make your boss awesome.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say, when I started the job, I knew that I wanted to create my own business, and it was kind of unheard of. I wasn't even on LinkedIn at the time, so we didn't really talk about having a side hustle as an attorney, or having a business as an attorney, as a practicing lawyer. And so I was really afraid of bringing that up to my boss. And he was like, yeah, like not a problem, as long as you get things done. And the more I learned about him, he shared about how he's also a drummer, and he is also a sailor. He has all this interesting stuff going on outside of the law, and he wanted that for me as well. And so that's one of the things that I absolutely love about him. The second thing is that he really has my best interest at heart. And so if I do make a mistake at work and I do mess something up, he has my back first and foremost, and make sure that I had all the resources and the tools that I needed to do the job that I wanted to do. And it's almost like, because of that, he kind of gave me this faith that it is possible to be kind and generous and gracious to your team in the law, which was really not my experience in the past. And so that encouraged me to speak up about like what actually should be the norm. Because so far, I think the narrative has been that in the legal industry, like you are supposed to be intense, you are supposed to be not very generous. That's how things are supposed to be. And he kind of shifted that paradigm for me, which allowed me to spread the love too.
Okay, I love that. But I have to move on to Heather now. Heather, my favorite quote from your chapter is, "One could say that I have life figured out. Of course, that wouldn't be true. Life can't be figured out. I now know that we can adjust as we go, and that we can change our minds." So you have an amazing story of changing your mind. So tell us a little bit more about what you meant by that quote.
Sure. So I love that you picked that quote, because I have changed my mind yet again since authoring my chapter, only whatever it was, a few months, a year ago. So I started my career thinking that I wanted to be a big law partner. That was my ultimate goal. I had a long-term plan to get there. It was very complicated and thought out. And of course, nothing played out as I expected. because I got to big law at a terrific firm with great colleagues, and then decided that there was something else I wanted to try. And so when I was in big law, I was challenged, I was learning, I was around some of the smartest people I've ever met. But I also had this other interest that I really wanted to explore. And I realized that the time I was spending as a junior and mid-level associate was also the time in my life when exploring my other option of becoming an entrepreneur made the most sense for me because I didn't yet have kids. And so taking really big risks was okay. So I left the law and with my husband founded a juice bar in Boston. I moved from New York where I'd been practicing home to Boston where I grew up, opened the juice bar, loved it. But after a few years realized that I actually missed practicing law and that maybe there was another opportunity in the law outside of big law that would work for me. And I found my way in-house almost by chance to a role at Boston Globe Media. I had just started kind of exploring the Boston legal market while still running the juice bar and with an infant at home. And I came across a job that looked really exciting and happened to have a connection to the general counsel who was hiring. He was willing to talk to me, which was very lucky. It was just because of the connection that he was willing to talk to me, but because of my juice bar experience, when I had negotiated all of my own contracts, he was willing to hire me in the end, which was terrific. And one of those weird things that's kind of the opposite of what John was saying about you want each of your moves to make sense. I definitely did not go to a juice bar so that I would get an in-house lawyer role, but I had a lot more success doing that than I would have if I had only had litigation background, which is what I was doing at SNC. And I kind of found my way into this job at the Globe that I absolutely loved. Like Angela, I had a terrific boss. He was just the ultimate champion, great guy. We'll keep in touch with him forever. I'm still in touch with him now that I've left. And so when I wrote the chapter, I was thinking like, this is really the job that is right for me right now. It challenges me. It gives me flexibility. I am really great at it at this point. I've been doing it for several years, and you get to a point where you're really good at your job, and that was nice. And then what's interesting about you asking the question now is that another opportunity came along. I did not go searching for it, but a woman who I knew actually from LinkedIn, unsurprisingly, reached out saying, a friend of mine is hiring to head up legal at this new venture firm. And she sort of described the role. And I thought, well, this is a complete change from what I've been doing. But maybe as I move into this kind of phase of my life and career, I am ready for another change. And so I went from, I'm really great at my job, I have a lot of flexibility, to where I am now, which is a little under 2 months into my first GC role, where I am working all the time to try and learn all the things, as one does when one switches companies. But I'm also the only and first lawyer at a company with very complex legal issues. And it worked for me in my career because of changes in my life too. So when I was at the Globe, I had an infant up to a 4-year-old. My son's now, almost 5, would be in school. I'm back to a point where I can give him the time he needs, but also like sleep through the night, which most of us don't get to do when we have really young kids. And so I feel like I have the mental capacity for this new challenge. And I don't get that same sense of, oh, I'm like really good at my job yet. I'm really, really learning my job. And I actually love that right now. So that's what that meant to me and means to me now.
I love that. Okay, there's so much in there I want to unpack, Heather, but I'm going to read Tasha's quote first, and then I'm going to ask you like 3 follow-up questions to all that great information you just shared. Your story is incredibly inspiring, and I love the risk-taking and reinvention in it. So Tasha, my favorite quote from your chapter is, "The desire to prove ourselves worthy of recognition, fueled by our ambitions, allows us to ignore the other important things in our lives, which leads eventually to unhappiness and burnout. We all deserve a better work-life balance. So tell us more.
That sort of just opened a whole can of worms, Michelle.
All right, tell us at least two things.
Seriously, right? I can tell you, I struggled with the path that I'm on only because, as I recall, my last year with my employer was pretty brutal. And I was really at that point, because I've been there for almost 15 years and moving up the ladder. And the only reason why I stayed was because I was moving up the ladder. And the only reason why anybody should actually stay anywhere is if you're making progress somewhere. So that's what I did. And I had made a lot of progress, had proven myself time and time again. But at this point, I was somewhat falling short of keeping up with constant demands and increased expectations. And it was like I was answering to people, and every time you make or meet an expectation, the bar is simply raised higher. So it was like, okay, I did this, now I've got to actually do more in order to get to that next stage. So combined with the pressure at work, and at the time my marriage was failing, and my mom was living with me at the time too, and she was actually showing signs of dementia, I was pretty frazzled at that point. And for someone who had been consistently exceeding expectations, I found out quickly that I wasn't getting much support from my employer. And I was really more than just a little bummed by that, because, you know, you spend somewhere for 15 years, you expect a little bit more support from people. So that left me wondering, like, why am I even forcing myself to continue to kill myself, basically? And so to put all of this in perspective, my job was 50 miles away from home. And it took me roughly an hour and a half with good traffic to actually get there. And at one particular day when I was there, I got a call from home saying that my mom had gotten out of the house and could not be found. And she was 87 years old and disoriented and loose in my neighborhood. And so my husband was home. My son was actually home at the time too. And I jumped in. I told my staff I had to go, jumped in my car. It still took me more than 2 hours to get home because of the time of day it was. Oh. So I'm on the phone the whole time talking to my husband, trying to figure out, and I'm frantic. And he then finds her across the street in a neighbor's yard, and the neighbor is trying to coax her back home. And by the time I got home, she was safe. She was back in her right mind. And I literally had to ask myself, how much longer can I do this when I'm actually really needed at home? And so it was weird because, you know, you sometimes get that little feeling that something sinister is about to happen. About a few months later, I actually ended up getting laid off. And at that point, there was no other choice but for me to start my own business and work from home. And so I wanted to be present for my mother. And I also wanted to be there for my son, because at this point he was about to start high school. And he also had to deal with the fact that his parents were splitting up. So I took the road that I needed to take. And it was one that I always wanted to actually make, but never actually did, or never actually got the gumption to start my own business. So it was sort of like out of a negative came a positive, but it also allowed me to spend the time that I needed to spend with my mother. I was actually with her when she took her last breath. I was next to her bed. I held her hand. I told her it was okay. Excuse me. And I told her that
Thank you for sharing.
And I was exactly where I needed to be.
Wow, Tasha, thank you for sharing that personal story. And I can relate. I was with my father too when he took his last breath. So I don't know how I move on from that, but I'm going to somehow.
I didn't mean to be a downer.
No, that was amazing. And I really genuinely thank you for sharing. That makes it so real. Angela, you recently got promoted. Congratulations. I would love to hear about that. And I know that in HR speak, sometimes a promotion or a promotion in place, and sometimes they require or result in structural change. So I'm curious about, how did you get promoted? What does it look like for you? And what advice maybe do you have for others who are trying to move up the ladder, as Tasha referred to?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the biggest thing that I would share is that I want to make what's in my interest an even better interest for the company. So something that was happening that I noticed was that when I was interacting with like other attorneys, like outside counsel or opposing counsel or something like that, because of my title, just corporate counsel, before I was promoted to senior counsel, a lot of the people were, and also because I looked younger and I don't know, for whatever reason, I was kind of being treated as a person that was like a legal assistant who didn't go to law school. And so when I noticed that, I realized, okay, outside of me feeling offended by that hurts the company. It hurts the company when I'm not able to effectively communicate with other attorneys or other stakeholders on behalf of the company. And so I believe it's the best interest of the company to be promoted so that I am considered as a senior member of the company that is able to speak on behalf of and make decisions for the company. And that's really the biggest reason that I should be promoted. And I feel like that was probably one of the easiest conversations that I had with my manager, my boss.
Oh, wow. That was so much more to that than I expected. That is amazing. I loved your framing. And this guy, your boss, is so cool. He's going to be my like boss role model going forward. Heather, I have to read this from your opening of your chapter. I quit my job as a litigation associate at a top international law firm in order to open a juice bar. Sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But I'm totally serious. And that decision defined and shaped my career in ways that were both expected and totally surprising. And it set me on the path to success as a lawyer, the path I am still on today. So you talked a little bit about this, but what I'm dying to know is you mentioned in the chapter that your parents both worked in big law their entire careers and were very successful lawyers. So what did they say? What did your parents say to you when you said, I'm quitting it all and opening a juice bar?
I am incredibly fortunate that my parents supported me all through high school and college and law school, in every sense of the word. I had a financial advantage too. They paid for law school. And then I went ahead and quit, and they were supportive. They said, do what makes you happy. If this is what makes you happy, great. And it went beyond just go ahead and do this. They're from here. My mom is still practicing and heads up a litigation group at her firm. And while we had the juice bar, would order catering from us every week for her colleagues. And they actually liked it, or at least they claimed to. I don't think she was doing this, just to support me. But as a change from the common law firm pizza. And my dad would come in and buy a smoothie every day, which I don't think he liked in the beginning, but he learned to like, just to be supportive. He's 86 now, so this is only a few years ago, but he's in his 80s. They were walking to our juice bar for a smoothie to support me. So they could not have been more supportive. And I really appreciated it also that when I did decide to go back to practicing, they never said, I told you so. Not that they told me not to leave, but they never sort of, denigrated my choices. They just said, great, if that's what you want to do, we're so happy for you and we will continue to support you. So I'm really, really fortunate in that sense.
And we'll save a lot of money not supporting your juice bar. I love that. Angela has the role model boss and you have the role model parents. I'm going to aim to be your parents. That's great. Tasha, I want to read an excerpt from your chapter. It's actually your ending. I don't expect others to follow my footsteps. My path is somewhat unique, and yours will be as well. You must find happiness and satisfaction in life on your own terms. Remember, you're in charge of your own destiny. Go for what you want, what you desire, and be prepared to step outside your comfort zone to achieve your goals. Believe in yourself and take ownership of your future. So boy, you took ownership. I mean, you shared that it was something you wanted to do. It wasn't completely your choice, but yet again, you could have looked for another job. Instead, you camped out in your house before it was cool to do so and started your own business. So tell us more. Tell us more about that journey.
Well, I actually made the choice of what I wanted to do and the path I wanted to follow while I was still in law school. And at the time, I wasn't sure if I would go directly into media communications and publishing. I thought, just like everybody else, I might have to go work in law for a while first, prove myself, make sure that everybody knows I used my law degree. But I was able to actually jump in almost immediately, actually, and then took a break to practice law at some point where I went to a law firm and chose a small law firm purposely because I thought that if I wanted to practice law, I wanted to actually get my hands as dirty as possible. And in a small law firm you're actually able to do that very quickly. So I was very involved in a lot of things and got a lot of experience in the 1.5 to 2 years that I was there with them. So I really appreciate that. It was just three partners and me. So you can imagine.
Oh, wow.
all three of them used me very thoroughly. But yeah, I got through that. But then, of course, I started getting bored after a while because, again, law practice isn't necessarily what I actually wanted to do at the end of the day. So unlike many students, I wasn't actually coming straight from undergrad like a lot of the students that I was in school with. And I had been out there working throughout undergrad. So I considered myself a little bit more mature mentally. And so when I decided what my path was actually going to be, I was better able to dismiss the naysayers and the other people who are always in your ear saying, so why would you go to law school and not practice? So I was actually able to beat back a lot of that because I sort of had a better sense of who I was and where I wanted to go. So, but here's the thing, I'll never say never. Because law practice it still crosses my mind sometimes, occasionally anyway. And I even have a friend of mine who actually continues to drop little hints here and there, say, come join me in my law firm, what have you. So but the thing is, starting a business, whether it's a law practice or a publishing business, is hard. And Angela can speak to this too. Is like, this is not the easiest thing to do. So it's very slow. And at some point you might think you're going to get comfortable, but honestly, as an entrepreneur and the only breadwinner in my home, I don't think I'm ever really going to feel comfortable because it's a constant hustle and you never really turn it off. You're never really off. And then the pandemic hit too, which was interesting. And I was really concerned more so about getting sick. And because when I get sick, nothing gets done. So that means money's not coming in, other things are not getting done. So the thought of having to work hard to further the mission of somebody else still doesn't sit well with me. So the idea of getting out and going and finding a job just doesn't, I'm at the age now where I don't really want to do that unless I really feel that your mission suits me to such an extent that I want to fight for you. Right now, in the meantime, I'm enjoying working with different clients, attorneys, and other professionals. And I'm very good at ensuring that they produce the best work that they need to in order to further their brand. So I'm happy with my choice and I'm happy to continue down this road, but I'll never say never.
I love that. Never say never. Angela, this is a great lead in to a question from the audience. So I was going to ask you about being a life coach and about the fact we're both coaches and why would lawyers hire a coach and what does it look like when you're coaching someone? But I want to add what an audience member asked as a question. She says, I love all the stories of pivots. I'm summarizing here. I think it's probably been done or said, or I'm actually probably not good enough to do it. How do we make friends with that kind of voice and take the leap anyway?
I love that the question started with how do we make friends with that thought? And I think that's like you're already on the right track. It's like not making a problem out of that doubt and realizing that that is part of the process. I mean, I can't remember a moment in my life where I had like absolutely no doubt. I feel like that is like this lifelong friend that sometimes you want to break up with, sometimes we embrace it, sometimes it's like just sitting there, but it's not something that is just gonna completely, you're gonna say goodbye to forever. And I love that awareness, which is really the first and most important step to moving forward to anything. And the reality is, like you said, like I'm not good enough. Like that story is a story that we are so used to. It is a story that not only we have created for ourselves, but it's also a story that so many other people have kind of like thrown at us. Yeah, are you sure you can do that? Are you sure this is the right path for you? And so there will be so many times when it's not just you that that doubts yourself. There will be other people, not out of undermining you, but almost like out of love. Like your family members will be concerned. They might be concerned about like just the uncertainty of those next steps. And so it's easy to go to those familiar stories. The thing that I would invite you to consider is instead of kind of going backwards towards all of the stories that you are familiar with, having the courage, having that kind of, I don't want to say fearlessness because the fear is always going to be there, but let's go back to courage of creating and painting this vision of what does light you up. And of course, it is going to be really scary. Like, what, I deserve a life that actually lights me up? That's not really something that we've been taught ever, really, as lawyers. So it really does take courage to paint that picture. And so I encourage you to think about that, whether like when you're taking a walk or brushing your teeth, like what does it look like for you? And even if it looks like completely wildly beyond your imagination, what if we made friends with that too? So that's where I would start.
I love that, Angela. Courage and curiosity, right? I love it. And by the way, Angela's chapter is called Out of Love. Tasha named all our chapters and she did such a good job. Heather, you recently started your first GC job. You mentioned this, and I am so curious to hear. Talk to me about the differences between being the Deputy General Counsel at Boston Globe Media and being the GC at Red Cell. One of the things I've noticed with my general counsel clients is that it is a huge transition to report to a CEO rather than to another lawyer. And I think it's a big transition because, first of all, that's just intimidating to report to a CEO. But I also think it's not just that it's intimidating, it's that for the first time in your career, perhaps, you report to someone who didn't go to law school and wasn't trained the same way you were and doesn't have the same mindset or thinking process. So tell us, what else is it that's different, and how have you experienced the transition from DGC to GC?
Yeah, it's been extremely different, not just because of the nature of the role, but because of the difference between the companies. Aside from being in different industries, Boston Globe has a little over 1,000 employees and Red Cell is still very small. I think we're under 50. So I probably had more internal clients who I spoke to on a, say, weekly to monthly basis at the Globe than there are people at Red Cell. So that's a huge change. But also being the lawyer who is advising the non-lawyer or the business person just requires a different set of kind of like mindsets, vocabularies, frameworks than when you're talking to another lawyer. I'm lucky that at the Globe, I was doing a lot of direct work with business people and less through my boss, the GC. So I think I was able to kind of port a lot over in that sense. But what's different and also a little bit more stressful about it, frankly, is that now that I am, the top lawyer, the one who's going to, almost definitely get listened to, the kind of pressure of getting it right is on me in a way that it wasn't at the Globe. And so I really am lucky to be someone who doesn't feel stressed that often. I have learned to do some of the things Angela talks about, like talking to myself about what's the story I'm telling myself? Why is this stressing me out? How is this serving me? And yet now as the GC, I definitely feel stress in a way that I didn't before, because I realized that if I get it wrong, it could, mess up a multi-billion-dollar deal, or, all sorts of things could go terribly wrong. And so there is more pressure on me. I also think it's a little bit, or a lot more strategic, in the sense of I'm building out a legal department and the entire legal function, which all GCs have to do. And I think GCs who are the first one at a company have to do even more so. So I'm not just thinking about the legal advice, but how should legal advice work at this company? And how should we even structure ourselves and our entities? So, other than being an in-house lawyer, it's basically different in every way, but I love it.
I'm so glad that you're happy with your choice. Tasha, so there are a lot of lawyers who would love to publish a book, who would love to write a book, or maybe they've written a book and they would love to publish a book, or maybe they have an article that they would love to turn into an anthology with 22 other people, like we did with Women in Law Discovering the True Meaning of Success. So if someone is interested in writing a book, whether it's about law or about something else, or even if they're not sure they have a book in them, but they just want to become a thought leader, tell us some advice, because you're the pro.
Okay, well, this is what I tell most of my prospective clients. First and foremost is, number one, you have to know your purpose and you have to know it well. And so your book can pretty much be about anything, because we are pretty much multifaceted. And we've already talked about how lawyers are more than just lawyers. We're so many different things. So your book doesn't necessarily have to be about law. And we can all, factor all of that into what we decide to do. But you have to know why you're doing it, and you have to believe in the reason why you're doing it, because writing is very time consuming and you don't want to lose sight of your reasons. So that's number one. Number two would be to know your audience, narrow it down, because your book shouldn't be for everyone. And I've had people come to me to say, well, my book can be read by everyone. Well, you don't necessarily want to write your book so that you're literally trying to write it for everybody. That's a huge mistake, because when you write for everyone, you're actually writing for no one. Your message ends up being very diminished, and because you're trying to cover so many different angles. So if you say you're writing for yourself, and some people do that too, that's fine as well. But know that you probably are going to be the only one reading it, because when you write, seriously, when you write, you must always keep your audience in mind. And when you write for yourself, you're not necessarily thinking about other people and what they need to get out of your writing. So it's always about the message and about how you get that across. Your book can actually attract different audiences though, but you always have to have, who is your primary audience? You can have a secondary, you can have a tertiary, but you're going to write for your primary audience. Number three is, let's see, number three is, it always takes longer than you think it will. And even though self-publishing is actually, it takes a shorter period of time than traditional, but most people really have no idea how much work goes into producing a publishable product, one that is actually worthy of publishing, so that you can be proud of it for years to come. So be patient. Shoddy work is not what you want to put out there, because it's always going to be a part of your brand, and you don't want something shoddy associated with your brand. When you rush things, you make mistakes, period. And then those problems will show up in your book reviews. What you really don't want is poor reviews. Number four, I would say is, let's see, most people, and mostly lawyers too, actually, think their writing is better than it really is. Boom, boom.
I can't imagine that.
I'm like, okay. So when it comes to doing something like this, check your ego at the door, please. When you work with someone like me, you're actually partnering. We're partnering. So we're working together. I'm acting as your writing coach, your consultant, your editor with a very sharp pencil, actually pen, because you can't erase that. So I'm very, we're working together and we're trying to get the best product for you to publish for your purpose and for your goals. So I always say, let me do my job, and then work with me, not against me. And that's the one good thing about what we did with this book, is that the ladies really allowed me to do my job as the editor and as the publisher. For thought leadership in general, if you're not able to write a book, and like I said, it is time consuming, what you can do is start off with articles, getting your articles published in various places. Above the Law, Attorney at Work, Attorney at Law, LinkedIn newsletters. There are different places that you can get your work published and build that repertoire and put yourself out there as a thought leader. But you do have to put yourself out there. A lot of times that's the issue, is like you're afraid to put yourself out there. You got to take that step. If it means publish something, some long form piece on LinkedIn first, and see what your connections do with that, how they react to it, and you can move on from there, but you have to start somewhere.
Well, and your advice about audience would apply to the thought leadership too. So great advice. So I think that John raised his hand. That was really polite, John. Do you want to ask a question or make a comment?
I did. First of all, you guys are doing amazing. Everyone's loving it, and including me. But Michelle, I wanted to hear from you. And you guys were talking about this relationship with the CEO, which I think is terrific. But being a GC at a time where there weren't a lot of women GCs, I'm sure you had to face some challenges when you were put in that position. My question is, what were the challenges like for you when you got in that position, and how do they compare with the women you're coaching today, years later? What are the challenges that they're seeing, that they're coming to you looking for the most support?
I don't think it's really changed very much. I mean, I worked for 4 CEOs and they were all men. Most of my clients work for male CEOs. I'm trying to think of I have 8 or 9 current clients that are GCs. I'm trying to think if any of them report to a woman. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone who does. So there's the gender divide, but more importantly than that, I think that there's 2 other things. One, business people are more optimistic than lawyers, right? So we go to law school and we get early law training, and everything is about risk mitigation and looking at the downside scenario, thinking about the worst case. And business people, especially business people who are going to make it to the top, are eternal optimists. They believe in the future. They believe in themselves. They believe in the company. So you're going to be going like this. If you work for a CEO and you go in with, let's talk about the downside scenario. Let's talk about the worst case. Let's think about all the negatives. That just will never work. You have to become optimistic, and you have to become glass half full. And it's a lot of work for lawyers because everything about our education and early training goes against that way of thinking. And then the other thing is just that lawyers are not very data driven. I believe that most of us went to law school because we weren't great at math. Even GCs who do have to learn a lot about financial statements and budgeting and have to get comfortable with math. That's it, right? We maybe get comfortable, but I do have 1 or 2 clients who excel at math, but it is the exception in law. So I think that you're going to have a boss who's going to be data driven. You're going to have a boss who's all about the numbers. I'll never forget, as long as I live, my favorite boss remembered a number I told him like 3 years before as the amount that we would settle a piece of litigation for. And he threw it back in my face like 100 times when we settled for more than that number. And I learned, never do that. Never tell a CEO a number that you're not rock solid on, because they will never forget it. And I don't remember numbers. I didn't remember I told him that number. Numbers is not my thing. It's not my jam. So I do think those are 2 things that stand out to me. Is CEOs are optimistic and they're data driven, and you have to adjust and you have to become glass half full, and you have to focus on the numbers in a way that nothing about your training led you to do. I mean, you're lucky if you have one class in law school that has anything to do with math or numbers or data.
That is amazing insight right there. Thank you.
Okay, I have to stop talking now, John. Angela, I really want to talk about your podcast because truly it is in my top 3 favorite podcasts. It's called Fit to Practice. Now, if somebody on here wants to start a podcast or wants to get on a podcast, if they want to become a guest, how do you recommend people do that?
Yeah, so I'll tell you that I didn't want to start a podcast. I when I was trying to build my business, I had like one client at the time, and I had absolutely no idea how to be an entrepreneur. And so I was just kind of looking around LinkedIn, seeing who can help me. And then just the idea that popped up in my head is publicity. Oh, I got to get my name out there. And I hired somebody who called himself a publicist. And so I was like, oh, maybe he can help me get on publications or write or whatever it is. I have absolutely like 0 connections, no network, no nothing. And he said, I think you should start a podcast. And this was even before like podcasts were cool and like all over the place, like everywhere. And I said, I thought podcasts were only for like really smart people, people who are more experienced, like people who are like not me. And he said, as long as you have a story, then you can start a podcast. And so I said no to him maybe about 12 more times. And then I finally gave in because I was like, why not? I don't have anything to lose. I have one client and I want to have more clients. And so I started it. And for 6 months, it didn't really it like no one was really listening to it, maybe like a few people a month. And so I was about to kind of like just close it all down. And this was right before the pandemic and before I went on my first maternity leave. And so I was just kind of letting everything go and just started talking to whoever wanted to talk to me and started connecting with them. And then of course the pandemic started, and as all of those conversations started rolling out, everybody started talking about it. People started telling me how much they enjoyed the podcast. And so what I realized is that as long as you are connecting with the people that you like, including yourself, connecting with yourself and learning how to express yourself and learning about who you are. And that is how you use your podcast, not to get listeners, not to get sponsors or whatever, then that is really the fastest way to build the connections that will be necessary to do whatever it is that you want to do. Same thing with becoming a guest on podcasts. I think a lot of the times that we try to be a guest because we want to get something out of it, but really I would encourage that the intention be more of like trying to connect with the other person and also connecting with yourself. And when that is the priority, then the conversations and opportunities, they land up pretty quickly.
Well, thank you, Angela. And thank you for having me on one of your episodes. I love that you ask every guest, what does it mean to be fit to practice to end? That is so fantastic. And I love hearing everyone's different answers. So we have another audience question. And Heather, I think this would be a great question for you because you did exactly what this audience member is trying to get the courage to do. So her question, I would like to make a transition from litigation to in-house. She's a senior lawyer. I know that I don't know what I don't know. And while I need to let go of that fear, to date, I'm unwilling to make this transition without getting a supportive mentor to help me through it. Is that a reasonable requirement, or do I just need to fake it till I make it and rely on my general smarts? What do you think?
I think if it's your first in-house role, the goal should be to find a boss with whom you can be honest about what you know, and it will be your boss, presumably the GC if you're already a senior litigator. It'll be their responsibility to help you figure out what you don't know. I don't think waiting until you somehow find outside support is the answer. There's no one coming on a white horse to save you, that type of thing. And we need to really take responsibility for ourselves, even when it's scary. And probably if you start applying to in-house jobs, you will get a lot of rejections and people will say, we want someone with prior in-house experience. but you only need one job that you're excited about that's also excited about you. And you may be able to find an in-house role that plays particularly to strengths you already have. I don't know if you're interested in potentially going to a client or someone in a similar industry, that type of thing. But I think you should start applying. And I also think having made that transition from law firm to not practicing at all to in-house, it's a lot less different and less scary than you think. I think the hard part is convincing someone to hire you. I actually didn't, at least for me, find the transition to in-house itself to be that challenging. It was just, I just needed someone to believe that I could do it so that they would give me the chance.
I agree, Heather. And I would also say very few people don't succeed or don't like it. I mean, sure, there's exceptions, but most people end up happy. And why not go for happiness? The other thing is there's lots of people who would probably love to mentor that audience member. And that reminds me, I want to be sure before we run out of time that each of you gets to share, how would you like people to connect with you if they were inspired by your chapter in the book, by your talk today? Let's go around, starting with you, Angela. What's the best way for someone to get in touch with you? I know for me, it's LinkedIn. People should feel free to send me connection requests or ask me questions and follow up if I didn't get to your question on this program. Angela, what about you?
Yeah, same here. You can find me on LinkedIn very easily. I'm under Angela Han. My website is angela-han.com. I noticed that there are a few other questions here that we didn't get to answer. So if you want to chat about it, please feel free to reach out and I'd love to talk through it with you.
Thank you so much. Tasha,
Yes.
should they reach you?
LinkedIn is probably the fastest way to get in touch with me. You can also go to my website at publishingforlawyers.com. And you can follow the hashtag behind the book on LinkedIn to find some of the stuff that I've posted. But more than likely, just connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions or follow up, then we can certainly move on from there.
Heather.
And can I say real quickly, though, thank
Sure.
you so much for everybody who put in the chat. I appreciate your words, and it was a difficult time for me, so I really do appreciate the kind words, so thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Tasha. You're amazing. Heather, how should they contact you?
LinkedIn's also best for me. I'm also in a bit of a very crazy period as I transition into my new job, so feel free to connect, ask questions, and if you don't hear back from me in a few days to a week, please reach out again. It doesn't mean I'm intentionally ignoring you. It just means I'm working on getting all my inboxes under control.
That's an amazingly generous statement. And I want to thank you all, speaking of generosity, for taking the time to be with us today. I am in awe of you. I love your stories. I have read the book 3 times, cover to cover. John, I know you wanted to close out. Please feel free.
We have to close up, but thank you all. It was really, really terrific. I think the commonality here is optimism. No matter what was stacked against you, you all rose above it and really achieved. So the optimism is just unbelievable. And Angela, I have the perfect idea for your next book is write a book about your boss. And I never asked anyone about their boss before and got a smile as big as yours when Michelle asked you about your boss. That was really something. That's my new inspiration, is to have people around me feel that way about working here. That's really, really terrific. So thank you all for attending. Again, we're off in July, but we'll be back in August, and we look forward to your continued support. Thank you so much.